Coming up, should a top draft pick dangled in front of the Brooklyn Nets' eyes convince Sean Marks to push the full reset button? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie, owner-operator of DFSR, for all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel. He's got you covered. I'm Adam Armbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast and the Devils on the New Jersey Devils Puck Luck podcast. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We're free on all those great platforms. And Doug, you came in and covered the draft lottery, which teams fell where, why no one else was celebrating except for the Spurs as the ping pong balls finally fell. But it did start to unfold a philosophical question for the Brooklyn Nets that I'm kind of surprised you and I do feel like we need to talk about. And that is pushing the full reset button on this franchise should certain opportunities arise, which would involve trading Mikal Bridges after he's endeared himself to us so strongly over such a short amount of time.
Yeah, this is really opened up something of a Pandora's box, I think, about how the Nets need to approach or could approach this offseason. I don't think there's any need to this situation. I think there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different ways to go. Not any of them feels all the way correct, and not any of them feels all the way wrong. But it does, at the core of it, I think it entertains a philosophical discussion about like where the Nets should be as a franchise right now, because they are in a pretty unique position here with who fell at the top of, or who, spiked near the top of the lottery, and what those teams' motivations might be at this point to have the Nets be like sort of a catalyst for pushing a reset button because of what these other teams want. I never thought going into this offseason we would really be discussing this all that much. But because of who landed here, specifically Portland and to some degree Houston, like I think it has to be discussed. Or we think it has to be discussed about like what the Nets' plan is here, because there's a wide range of outcomes, and unfortunately, it would start and stop with like what you do with Mikal Bridges and whether or not you should trade him. And we could discuss what that means. I discussed it a little bit sort of yesterday, but I think, and I honestly think we'll discuss this for like many days, and we're going to do crossover stuff with the Rockets guys. And we're going to do crossover stuff with the Blazers guys coming up here. Like that's all in the works right now. But yeah, trading Mikal Bridges, I think, is on the table, and it's almost has nothing to do with Mikal Bridges. Like if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so you mentioned about the crossovers. Those are going to be great because we'll get a little bit more of a drill down perspective on what teams would be offering and whether or not that reaches the threshold. On the back end of this episode, we'll tell you whether or not we think the Nets should do this at any point, depending on the packages. But before we get to Houston and Portland, those are the two teams that we want to discuss here from an internal level for the Brooklyn Nets. And you mentioned doesn't have anything to do with Mikal Bridges because all he did was come over here, take the next big step forward, then confirm that in the playoffs and tell you that, okay, while the ceiling of this team right now is certainly not near championship level, you at least keep that healthy floor and you feel like you return some of the good vibes to this franchise. But here's the trickle down effect around this. Like, let's just talk about if the Nets were willing to explore this option. Once you move Mikal Bridges, all of a sudden it triggers all these other things. Cam Johnson, you can back right off of feeling like you have to sign him to a contract this offseason. So you avoid committing $20+ million to him over 4 years. The DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith contract, yep, ready to move that. Royce O'Neal, ready to move that. And then you're just a year away from clearing off from Joe Harris's money. And all of a sudden, the young, new rebuilding, era of this team kicks into full effect. And obviously, Mikal Bridges is the number one component of that and the catalyst for it. But it is very weird, man. I did not think you and I would both agree. I never thought that in this offseason, I would already at least be saying, can't go without discussing the possibility of moving Mikal Bridges depending on what team comes to the table.
Right. And so the problem with the trading Bridges, there's two inherent issues with trying to trade, thinking about trading Bridges, and it's like they're sort of like existential issues, but they're also into some ways concrete. The two main issues. Okay, all right. There's three main issues with trading Bridges. The first is he's really good and the contract's amazing. So that's
Yep.
usually not what you trade, right? Like you usually, if the contract's amazing, he's clearly better than his contract is now. That is typically not who you would ever trade. So I think from like that standpoint, the Nets would be fully within their right to like never do it and never even discuss it, right? From that point, just from that standpoint, number one. The second reason that it's very difficult to think about trading Mikal Bridges is that he's the face of what came back for like sort of the failed superstar era. He's like the last guy. Well, he and Ben Simmons. And unfortunately, you don't want Ben Simmons to be the face of that. So that's not going to be the case. So you need to be Mikal Bridges. He gets traded for Durant. That just from an optics level is nearly impossible to move away from. The third is
Ben Simmons being the face of a rebuild would be like the missing persons on the side of a milk carton, which is never what you
exactly.
want.
Exactly. Like that is he's just not it. So,
Yeah.
And then the third is that, and this is just like from a functional standpoint, and this is kind of where Houston actually comes in, is the Nets aren't really positioned to tank in a way that a lot of other teams that would want to go this route would, right? Because they don't own their draft picks going forward. Like they don't have tons of incentive to be bad in the short term because Houston has those picks. Now, it is interesting that Houston might be incentivized to move off the fourth pick, right? Like it's unclear like where they're going or like who they want to pair certain players with. So like I'm not exactly sure where that lands, but like those three things are like sort of blockers for wanting to do, for like the Nets thinking about this trade. I still think they should really consider it. Like, because I think like what could be on the table is so significant that it should be considered. But those three things are, I would call them significant blockers to like the beginning of the discussion, but I don't think each and any one of them on their own is a deal breaker.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because we just had, and by the way, this was Doug Norrie's brainchild, talking about a player like Kuminga, Golden State Warriors, where they are with him, what he's looking to accomplish. And I do think before we talk about Houston specifically is the really intriguing one to me out of the two because of what they can offer in getting the Nets back one of their future first round picks. But I think it's the both and here. Like this could be a perfect storm kind of scenario in this offseason where the Nets and Sean Marks are compelled to consider this because not only do you get a top 3 or top 4 pick potentially and maybe get back some control of your own future, you also have an opportunity potentially, whether Kuminga and other players in the league, to go acquire another young player, right? And set up your young timeline the right way, knowing as well that you also have Nicholas Claxton, who's still just 23 years old, right? So, this might be one of those instances where if not the players like Kuminga were on the table, well, makes it a little bit trickier. If it's not that Houston has one of your first round picks, a lot harder to do it, right? So it's it's very Netsian in a lot of ways with the way things go with this franchise that like, of course, the thing you think wouldn't be possible, like a big three failing before it even got started, that turned out to be true. And the world where you consider moving Mikal Bridges is now certainly an option on the table. And I think the next step here is Houston, Portland. What would those packages look like? And are they getting to the level where Sean Marks and the Nets do seriously consider it?
All right, before we get to that, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage, that's eBay Motors My Garage, and look for the green check to know the part will fill or your money back. Just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
I will say I sometimes think about going to Doug Norrie's garage just to see what he has in there. But I digress. The ping pong balls have fallen. The draft lottery order is in effect. The Spurs spiked the number 1, and I think that's great for the NBA. We don't need to worry about that. Then you also have most critically, when you get to 3 and 4, Portland and then Houston. And this is when we talk about should the Nets consider trading Mikal Bridges, the crux of it. let's just start in order of where they are on the board. Portland's at 3. We understand that they are in the mode of being willing to move off of Dame Lillard and to maybe move off of that pick at the top or move that pick to acquire a talent like Mikal Bridges to pair with Dame Lillard. They got everything on the table for them. Do they have a package in your mind, the initial package, that the Nets go, oh, okay, this is something that we would really consider? Or does it get scoffable for Sean Marks where they go, you can't come close to what was, by the way, 4 first-round pick value on Mikal Bridges at a potential pass-through at the deadline, as was reported with the Memphis Grizzlies?
Okay, so just a real quick summary of the Dame situation, which we are going to cover like more in depth. We are going to eventually, at the end of the week, with Mike Richmond from Lockdown Blazers, we're going to jump on with him before the end of the week, so to get like a real lay of the land with Portland. I will say this: Portland for sure has a package that you would really consider. Like they have it in. Whether they would offer it, I don't know, but they have enough that you would really have to consider it. I mean, they have this year's number 3. They have Shaedon Sharpe. They have a guy like Simons for salary matching, and jury's a little bit out on him, but like whatever. Let's just call him good. I'm not willing to go all the way there. He's good. He's fine. And they have like some other kind of veteran guys that can get off of. Like there are, or excuse me, other young guys that can get off. They have a package in there. I'm not sure they would go all the way there for Bridges, but they have it. The interesting thing about the Blazers are such a fascinating team right now because they could go all in either direction in a way that you
all
almost
in,
like
never. All out.
It's crazy. It's crazy. They could be like, hey, no, you know what? This is a sharp. This is a sharp team moving forward. This could be the number 3 pick. Like that's like this is going to be the team that we just go from here on out. Or they could go the other way and like say that we're going to sell some of these guys and try to pair someone with Lillard, right? Like, do you think it's going to be, you know what I mean? It could be Brandon Miller, Shaedon Sharpe's team going forward with no Damian Lillard. It could be neither guys and a bunch of veterans around him. He's signaled that he does not want to. He's actually said it. He's like, I'm not interested in playing with 19-year-olds anymore. Like, so I think they have to make a full-on decision. They for sure have a package that you would really start listening to if they wanted to go all the way there. I think the Nets are in an interesting situation. This is like a good thing for the Nets. They are in a position to ask for everything or to not do it. Like this is the other part of the Mikal Bridges. Like they don't have to do this. And that does put them in a situation of like being blown away. So I'm fully, when it comes to Mikal, and this is sort of interesting when we talk about the Rockets as well. But I will say, like they're in a good situation with Bridges that like they only need to be blown away to the point of never being able to say no, because like any middling, like this isn't the Harden Simmons thing, right? Like this is not that. This is
no,
and this isn't even Durant. It's like, hey, we're good with this guy. It would have to be everything for us to think about it, right? But the Blazers do have a package that you would start. You don't hang the phone up for sure.
Yeah, but and before we flip into Houston, one of the pause question I had inside of this was 2 things. One, the players matter, obviously, and then picks could potentially matter in this too. So I have this little thing about, and how many picks would make it palatable if they want to keep Dame in Portland and then they want to bring in Mikal. Well, you don't want to give up everybody, and the Nets can afford to have that big bargain in front of them. But do the Nets need to be prepared? Like, can this only come from one side, as in, the Portland Trail Blazers have reached out to the Brooklyn Nets regarding Mikal Bridges. The reported package is X. And the only way that it can go forward in any direction is to be a firm, the Nets have entered discussions, and the goal here is to move Mikal, or the Nets have rejected it and have firmly said, Mikal is the centerpiece to our future. We're not fielding offers, because it does erode any and all of the goodwill around the Kevin Durant trade and Mikal Bridges being here and what that feels like. If you say, we spent a couple of months in the offseason kind of thinking about whether or not we would move Mikal and kind of hit the rebuild, when you've been outwardly saying, this is what we're doing going forward.
So you're saying like you're wondering if it like does too much internal damage just to even discuss it? Is that the question? Like,
yeah, if you go to the table and you say it broke down, they went back and forth, the Nets wanted one more first round pick, or they wanted a particular player, it doesn't work out, it breaks down, the Nets are moving forward with Mikal, they're re-signing Cam Johnson. Does that do damage for those 2 players, the guys that you brought in and said, you're our guys? I get that maybe this is the least concerning note around this, but for a franchise that has been mired in discontent stars and turmoil and disruption, you kind of don't want to rock the boat unless you're ready to flip the thing over and build a new boat.
I think it matters. I think you're correct. I think it matters to the point where that would definitely be on their minds. I think they're very aware of this, like the optics around this situation. I actually think this is why they weren't even in the lottery. Like we talked about this for
Right.
a while. Like I think we talked about this at the time and we talked about it, as the season ended. The reason they weren't in the lottery is because they wanted to send a certain message about the team, even if that message came at the cost of like a good organizational decision around like, trying to get into the lottery. So I think this stuff is things that they probably overweigh for a non-championship team for sure.
Right.
Right. Like I think that like we have lots of examples now of them just kind of caring about this stuff a lot, right? Like caring about the optics, even if it's like bad organizational decisions. Like there's lots of examples of this stuff. And so I do think, that could be the hang up the phone situation before anyone even calls, because they don't even want to send a signal to this guy who they want to be their guy for a long period of time. By the way, that's fine. It's fine. Bridges is a good player, a good dude. Like I'd be fine with them keeping him. I just get worried a little around that being the driving force behind decision making, because that really shouldn't be it, because that's not the goal. Like there's no nice guy awards. Like there's no nice guy awards at the end of the year for just being like, hey, we were all great around the campfire this year, right? And like that's like that's just not what it's about. And so I do think there's a middle ground, and I think there's a fine line with this stuff. But if they hung up because that was the only reason, that would be bad. That's super bad business.
It falls into the category, that phrase of, throwing good money after bad, right? Making a decision in this moment based on the poor decisions or decisions you regret from the past is bad information to be going forward with. If this move makes sense in a vacuum, if it makes sense in a vacuum, then you should be considering it like any other team that would be in a similar set of circumstances. This is going to span into our third segment here, but I do just want to tee up what it is about the Houston Rockets deal that becomes so enticing, and then ultimately we'll discuss if it ever gets to that threshold. Do you feel like Houston and the Nets getting back their pick, is that the linchpin to this? Like when you look at the Houston Rockets, and we know the whole reason why, and you said we discussed this at length on this podcast. Why do the Nets not want to go into tank mode? Why are they staying out of the lottery? Because they don't have their own pick, so it doesn't matter. All of the sudden, you can flip it on its head, get back next year's first round pick, and actually be in the lottery potentially. There is a pitfall to this, but is the Houston package potentially the more enticing option for that reason to you?
No, it's not. I would rather
the players
just
matter
Bridges.
more to me, just to be clear. I don't want to make this all about asking you questions. I think that getting the players back matter more and having a core that you fundamentally feel you can build with.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you shouldn't be trading Bridges just to get a pick back. I don't think like your own pick back. I don't think that's good business. Again, Bridges is great. Like I don't really want to trade him. Like I just think that they could. My point is in this Houston thing too, they could get bowled over here, right? Like there's a part like just a real quick about the Blazers thing, and then we'll talk about Bridges and Dame. Dame's been on record of like being super complimentary of Mikal Bridges, right? Like he wants to play with him. Like they have a history. I don't think it would there's a world where Bridges likes that better. I don't know. He's like, hey, going to we'll be a better team. And like don't discount this part of it either. Like we all talk about Mikal Bridges, he's lucky to be here. Like there's a world where he just wants to go play in Portland because they would just be a better team with him and Dame, right? That's never been said, but whatever. The Houston thing is different because just even getting down to that fourth pick makes a difference. It's not as good. Like this is a top 3 draft for sure. Maybe even top 2 if it's just like Scoot and Wemby for you, or Wemby and Scoot. I mean, Miller is, projected to go 3, and he's looks like he's gonna be really, really good too. There is a drop off if you think it's like Eamon Thompson. There is a drop off when you get to 4 here. Getting the pick back would be interesting, but I don't think that's not enough. Like the Nets would have to get more. It'd have to be like multi-pick. It would have to be like a multi-team deal to grab a bunch of stuff here, and then kind of throwing everybody out and getting the pick back and bringing a bunch of guys. So no, the Houston part of it does not entice you. I do want to ask you one thing. Did you see the quote I tried to find it real quick from James Harden about what he said he wanted to be able to do. You'll absolutely love this. Wait, did you see it? About what do you want in this offseason?
Yeah. If you have it in front of you, because it was like, basically like philosophically, what do you want to be as a basketball player? And his response,
he said
was
he
like,
wants he wants to entertain suitors this is from Chris Haynes, that present a competitive roster and the basketball freedom for the star to be himself. Like
James want to harden, baby. James want to harden. I don't want to mess around.
Like, Houston deserves what it gets. The only reason I actually want to go after the Houston thing is just to punish them for like feeling like this is like, you feel like it's a good basketball decision to bring this guy back. The basketball freedom to do like what he wants. Like, what on earth? Anyway, so, but if they could be, if Houston's in the psycho zone, which it seems like they might be heading into, like I do want to entertain. I want the Nets to entertain possibilities to be able to like take advantage of a situation like that too, like sign and trade Cam Johnson. Like those things I think are on the table too. If you have a team that has lost its mind with what it wants to do, but for Mikal, no, I don't think Houston. Do you think Houston has enough to get it done? I don't think so.
No, because honestly, remember, like one of the things, maybe we'll probably never get to this point unless the packages really start to get put on the table, right? But in theory, you go and you make these moves and you get a top pick here, and then you have the lottery pick next year. Now with the Houston option, it's far more likely that you can tank yourself and be in the lottery next year, right? Because you move all the pieces and it's good. In the Portland scenario, getting back quality players, it's like you run some risk of accidentally messing up getting into the lottery next year, even, depending on how those ratios work out and extra picks and all that kind of stuff. I will just, if I can, on the Houston thing, I cannot drill this home hard enough. James Harden is telling you that he wants to just get there and huck and chuck it and not really be concerned about wins and losses. And that does make that package very intriguing, because it means that you could like watch Houston go off into oblivion and then comfortably get back into your lottery spot. At the end of the day with these packages, I think the ask, if it got to the point where they said Nets responded with this into any overtures around Mikal, would be the kind of package you ask for when you don't have any interest in really moving off of the player, right? Like, hey, I want 4 first-round picks. I want 2 players. I want Sharp and I want Simon. And I want, I want that first round high pick this year, right? You get to a threshold where it's very unlikely. Here's a more interesting thing to me. Does this ever get flipped on its head? Like, remember, when Dame was complimentary around Mikal, every Nets fans were like, hey, baby, we got all kinds of first round picks. Like, let's talk action and bring in Dame. This has reversed that. But which is the more attractive? Maybe this is just a fun thing to kind of close out on here. What's more attractive to you from a basketball standpoint? Dame Lillard coming and being a part of what the Brooklyn Nets have, or Mikal Bridges going and be a part of what Portland has going on?
Yeah, this is why I'm super excited to talk to Mike later in the week too, because like this is the other part of it. This is where we talked about at the beginning, where we're just in this crazy zone here, where there's like this other option, which brings in Dame.
They both come into the negotiating room and neither one realizes they're talking about the opposite deal. They're no. I want Mikal. No. We're talking about you giving us Dame, right? I apologize. I was way off.
This is what we used to always make fun of. I don't know if you ever play Settlers of Catan, but like when we would play Settlers of Catan and with my wife Sabrina, and we'd always be trading something, and she'd be like, "I want wheat," and it's like, "I'll give you 2 wheat." It's like, "No, I'll give you wheat." Like we just go this. It was like the running joke that no one could ever understand what she wanted to trade because it was always mispronounced. It was always misstated at the beginning. Okay, so I'm of 2 minds here.
Yeah,
like with this whole thing, I have 2 opinions. 1 year of basketball, I'd love to have Dame in the door and see what like a Dame, Bridges, Claxton, I don't know how, like something like that, like version of the team looks like, from some scoring, some defense, and you kind of figure out the pieces. Would it win the championship? No. Would it be super fun? Definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
But I just think it would be terrible organizationally to do that. Like what the price they would need to pay for Portland to move off Dame, the Nets just don't have enough in their coffers to they'd be doing this. It'd be the Harden thing all over again, except that they would have to try to piece it back together on the back end. You know what I mean?
Yep.
We're doing the same exact thing here. We like this conversation around the Houston picks would be, we just have you having the same conversation in 2 years about like where they're getting the picks back from. And there's just no way around it. There's no way. They can't end any other way with these guards. Like Dame's great. He's amazing. As with all of this, this is not anti-Lillard and it's not anti-Bridges. It's pro-Bridges. It's just that, like, I mean, where do you land? Like, I that to me would be the worst option because of what they would almost have to definitely give up.
Yep. Yeah. That's where I think, and this is, it's impacted by the star era, of course, but also just from a smart franchise building perspective, the short-term gains are not sizable enough to forego your long-term future. And the Nets have been down ugly roads in very recent seasons, right? So that becomes hard. Whatever Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson.
Hold on. I'll say one thing. If you could somehow get off the Simmons contract with it, I would change my tune. And they probably would definitely have. They definitely have to because it's the only money that matches.
Now,
in that scenario, maybe if Simmons plus all your assets goes back, it's still probably not what I want to do because the Simmons money comes off way earlier. I don't know. When I say that to you, if it's like Simmons plus all the rest of their picks, like these Phoenix unprotected and stuff like that, I don't know. Does that change at all for you?
As I said before, I've had conversations before in the trade machine world. And by the way, this is actually a version of it where Dame ends up somewhere else and the Nets pick up some scraps off of Portland. But there are versions of that where Ben Simmons, that's the key thing here. And, you talk about have to attach a pick or two to move his contract. So, if you end up telling me it's 4 first-round picks, Cam Thomas, and Ben Simmons' contract gets dumped there and you get back Dame, well, it at least moves that timeline where all of a sudden you're underneath the luxury tax and you figured a lot out. And 2 years from now, even if Dame is gone at that point, you still have Mikal, you still have Cam Johnson, you still have Nick Claxton, and you're still actually you're going to have draft picks. You're not going to give up every single asset you have here. So you can still find yourself by 28 and 29 having your own picks or something left over from Phoenix or Dallas and move forward with that. So is that a world that I would consider it? Yes, because Dame Lillard is an incredible talent and I like him as a player. I like him as a personality. That said, we'll find out what Gatlin Jackson offers, what Mike offers when we do these crossovers with them. I think what ends up happening is they stop short of the threshold the Nets would need for one of these deals to go through. And I think that I'll be perfectly content if nothing happens, right? Because shy of an everything, which would be, and by the way, there's a difference between 3 and 4 here. Getting the 3rd pick matters versus getting the 4th pick overall in these packages, potentially with the players that are there. If it's that and it's Kuminga and it's these things, like I can paint a picture. I like Mikal Bridges. I like Cam Johnson. I like Nicholas Claxton. Like maybe I just want to see this play out. Maybe, and I know this is a very cliche thing and fans will beat me up in the comments on this and I probably deserve it. I want the breath of air of just watching a team compete and play. And oh, by the way, the Nets still have 21 and 22 in this draft. They can still do things to build out this team in the short term. It is not the nuclear option. Portland is desperate right now to do something. Brooklyn is not. And that's a big component of this too. The Nets do not have to do anything right now. Portland feels like they're trying to get their house in order or burn the thing down.
Yeah, it's funny. After having like kind of ruminated on this all day, we'll get out of here in a second, but like ruminating on this all day and read a million comments. Much appreciate everyone that was in YouTube. This last episode might have set the comments record for an episode for us. It was like, and because it's a topic that is kind of like near and dear to Nets fans' hearts, right? Like this is fork in the road territory for the team. We're forking the road territory for a lot of organizations here. Like we're going to talk about this a lot this summer. Like, is that like there are so many organizations that do not know if they're coming or going, right? Like, and the Nets are in an interesting place to like take a lot of advantage of that. I think if they're smart about it, and this is like part of that discussion for me, is like they have the opportunity to take full advantage. I will say the comments, Twitter, NBA circles, this is closer to 50-50 on what people want to do than I thought it was going to be. Like just reading the sentiments of people, there was a lot more of let's do it. Like with the Blazer trade, Bridges out, Dame not Dame coming back. Most people do not want to do that.
No, yeah.
Bridges out, get a haul back. There were a lot more people that were into that idea than I thought there would be. And I found that interesting.
Yeah, and credit to fans, to general NBA fans. Like you know that right now there is some ceiling with this team, and then moving on from that creates a new unknown. I'll give this. This isn't a concrete state. This isn't a concrete reality, but I think the biggest reason why the Nets won't do anything in this vein this offseason, and especially ahead of the draft, is because, as you said at the top, the Mikal Bridges contract, the Nets can re-sign Cam Johnson. They can wait out the Ben Simmons deal. 2 years from now, they could be right at the exact same point, fielding offers for Mikal Bridges. So the Nets have this timeline of being able to see what they can build around these players. And if over 2 seasons it doesn't work out, guess what? It becomes more palatable to the organization. It becomes more palatable to the fan base because you tried that version of it. You didn't push, cancel, delete before it even had a chance to really germinate. So I think that's actually as big a factor as anything here. And if you put Cam Johnson on a $20 million a year contract, that could become valuable as well. So the Nets have time on this, even if it feels like some of the best offers could be on the table in this moment.
And well, I know we keep saying last things, but this Spurs like
and
so many.
This will be the last thing I'm gonna say.
We're gonna talk about this too. There's going to be a point, not next year, but the year after, where this CBA is going to start really mattering for some of these teams. The worst thing you can do right now as an organization is start adding bad money. It's such a death knell. The Lillard thing could be like that, right? Like bad money going forward. If the Nets can just avoid that, like putting bad money in the books, and getting Simmons out of here, getting that contract out of here, they will be well positioned to start to like take in some of that bad money for assets, like from other teams. And I think they really need to if they don't do this, they have to keep their powder dry. Like for that situation, there are going to be teams that are going to be desperate to move off these contracts when the CBA kicks in, because it's so prohibitive to like what some of these teams are going to be able to do. And some of them just have money on the books already that like they're just not going to be able to get away with. The Nets actually aren't in that situation. They're going to get Simmons off the books before that happens. And they will be in a position. So no matter what they do here, Mikal or otherwise, I just really hope they don't screw up their ability to do that later, because that is how this is sort of how they reset things before with Marks. Mark did this once with the playbook, right? Like they will have a chance to do it again.
Okay, let's get out of here, because I just thought of a quote off the top of my head and I really want to utilize it. I don't want to burn it here, but we'll discuss. Be there for the crossovers with Locked On Portland Blazers, with Locked On Rockets, obviously, as we'll go ahead and flesh these out and really drill down on the scenarios that could be possible.
Okay. Again, much appreciated everyone, and great numbers on YouTube with the comments, man. I mean, unbelievable. Really, really appreciative. Everyone that jumped in with the comments. Nice, mean and otherwise. Much appreciated you just getting in there and having the conversation. Make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Jump in on the conversation.
And now that's what they call a classic win-win-win scenario where everybody wins. That's Michael Scott.
One of my all-time favorites, conflict resolution. We will be back again with plenty of crossovers tomorrow, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.